This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm your host, Steve Gould, guys, but this is Cops in the News for the week of, well, for the last 3 weeks, actually, when we go back and we take a look at the stories that involve police and some topical cultural stories, and we chat about them with either Ken Roybal or a past guest. And today is a past guest. You will remember him. He told some really great stories, and actually, he has a story that he hasn't. He told me when we stopped the interview last time. I'm talking about Patrick O'Donnell. He's an author of such books as Field Training and Probation. He's the podcast host of Cops and Writers, and we're welcoming back one more time. Patrick, welcome to Cops in the News, brother.
Thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure. I'm glad to have you, man. Like I was telling you before, we got a lot of great comments about your last appearance, and when we finished the interview, I was super happy with it. And then you told me that story, which we will tell later. That was just lunacy. So I appreciate you taking the time to come back on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Always up for something like this.
How are things going on Cops and Writers?
Things are going well. I'm going to start book 4 in the Brew City Blues series tomorrow, actually. I'm going to start pounding that out. I believe that's going to be called Honor and Valor. And again, it's just following the main character along his career progression with all the little soap opera-y kind of things mixed in there that cops get into, etc. Did my first book signing yesterday. That was interesting.
How cool is that?
Bookstore. It was, they have something that they call an art crawl. So it was me and 3 other authors and a musician. She was playing the guitar, and her father-in-law, who was probably like 80 years old, was playing the bongos with her. Okay. So that was kind of cool. I thought it was neat. And then there was also a painter there that, she had some really good stuff. That was in Waukesha, Martha Merrill's. It's a local independent bookstore, so that was fun. But it's Wisconsin, and the weather turned to what after about an hour, and then foot traffic almost disappeared, and it's like, oh well, that's the way it is.
Right. So initially, though, you had some people.
Yeah, at first we did, and sold some books, autographed some books, and actually some people showed up that are fans of the podcast and the Facebook group and all that. So I really, really appreciate it when people do that. And I had some buddies show up, and it was fun. It was my wife showed up. So yeah, it was a good time.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's always got to be nerve wracking when you put yourself out there to do like a meetup in public. You know what I mean? So yeah. On your podcast, Cops and Writers, are you the solo host, or you have co-hosts, right?
It's usually just me, and I'm interviewing somebody. I have had co-hosts for special occasions.
Okay,
when
that's what I saw.
I think my 100th show, I had a bunch of people on there that were really popular. Some of the more higher rated episodes, or just friends, that I wanted to have on there. It's always fun to kind of shoot the breeze with somebody else, and yeah, I enjoy that. That's a lot of fun. And the last episode that I had, I introduced the fact that I'm gonna co-host a Writers Police Academy up in Appleton, Wisconsin, June 1st through the 4th, and it's gonna be called the Cops and Writers Interactive Writers Conference. And my wife is like, "Oh, Cop Camp!" So so they're gonna go up to. Yeah, it's only going to be 30, 40 people, and we're going to have them go through, they have a beautiful academy up there. It's really new. Everything is high speed, high tech, and it's up in Appleton. It's the Fox Valley Technical College. One half is the police academy, and the other half is the fire academy. And, I mean, they've got a skid cannon, a skid track with water cannons, pit cars, really nice FATS machine. It's got 3 screens. and
Yeah.
all kinds of like fun CSI kind of stuff. So we're going to have these writers go through a lot of this police stuff.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
So it's going to be, like I said, interactive, and you're going to have a chance to talk to these people. I've got some really good guests that I'm literally flying from all over the country to come in. And it's funny, my partner, RJ Beam, and I were looking at the numbers, and it's like, well, I guess we're not going to make any money on this, but hey, it'll be fun, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so.
That's awesome, brother.
We weren't out to make a ton of money anyways. So yeah, it's going to be a great experience. So a lot of my time and effort has been geared towards that.
Awesome, man. Sounds like you got a lot of good stuff going on. I like it.
I do.
So, Patrick, I'm gonna throw some stories at you, and I want your candid. You're retired, so you can go candid, full throttle, Charlie Angels 3 opinion.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
the first one, we have an Ohio cop doing a traffic stop. You've done a lot of traffic stops. I've done a lot of traffic stops. People listening probably have done traffic stops if they're cops. The problem is Amanda Mills, the operator, ends up getting her wrist broken by the officer. And true to form with a lot of what we see in the media with police officers, the only snippet of video we have from this is from her, because these officers, I don't think they had body cams. I didn't see one in her video, and
No.
or they didn't.
It's just it was like a cell phone that was thrown on the seat.
Right.
And you're hearing the audio, but you're not really seeing what's going on. And it's just a snippet.
So I was looking at trying to think, and we're going to show you the clip. I was thinking, I've been driving, running radar, like moving radar, and I've spun on people and pulled around, and I've had people not stop for like a couple miles, but I can tell that they're elderly or there's something else going on. And it's like, it's unbelievable. You're behind them and you're like blasting them, blasting them with the air horn, with the siren. They finally pull over, and it's like an older person that was just like, oh, me? And it's almost like, should you be driving? This is insane.
Yeah.
But I didn't call like a pursuit. I just said, I can kind of read. The kind of car it is, who's driving it. You can kind of get a feel. So from what I hear, the little bit of the cop side that you can get from the news, which is very small, is that she was speeding and didn't stop immediately. And what you'll see in the video is that people have this boldness now where like First Amendment auditors, where it's like, it's just totally cool to start filming people all the time. So It's kind of like in this video, she's kind of like giving this vibe of like, this cop might do anything to me. I better get this on video. And she's not, although we don't know if he's in the right or not, trying to pull her out of the car, she's not complying. She's, like a lot of people do, verbally saying she is. I'm not resisting, but is resisting.
Right.
And the one thing you should know is that you have no right to resist. Later, if the cop is wrong, it will be sorted out. But you shouldn't fight against, especially something like this where he's telling you to get out of the car and you don't. But the problem is they dropped all the charges except for the speeding. So that doesn't help the cop out, right?
No, it does not.
It kind of makes it hard. So let's take a look at the video and let me know what you think.
Stop it! Ow!
Out of the car. Out of the car.
What did I do? Ow!
Just stop. Just stop.
Ow!
Calm down. It's not your show. It's mine. Radio, we got one detained for resisting. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Stop resisting.
I'm not resisting.
Stop moving. Stop moving. If you do something, you do it. Here it comes.
But my car's overheated. What did I do?
What the heck was that about?
I don't
No.
Man, I ain't pulling in anywhere and I'm recording.
All right.
Well, we'll go my way.
Did she run from you? Were you guys previously
She was
stopped?
going 66. I got behind her trying to light. She kept going, and then she finally slammed on the brakes, sliding to stop here.
I got you.
Before you start going to the car. 66 and 35. Okay. Get behind her, turn the light.
So, what do you take from that, Patrick?
Boy, there's so much that pops into my head. Obviously, we don't know the whole story. We're just seeing a snippet.
Right.
Obviously, it's very anti-police, to say the least. I mean, the guy just looks like a big old bully, and we don't know what transpired beforehand. Now, if you stop somebody for going, it was like about 30 over the limit, thereabouts, it sounds like. Is it 35 mile an hour zone, and she's going like 66 or 65.
Something like
or
that,
something
yeah.
like that. Yeah, so she's going over 30. All right, is there a reason why? Is she fleeing from something else? Does she not want to get caught because she's wanted for something, or she has something in the car? Those are where, you know, a police officer's brains should be going to. It's like, I wonder why. Now, like you said before, sometimes you have old people. Sometimes, I mean, you don't know. You're always going to err on the side of caution. But I'll tell you a really quick story that happened to me. As a sergeant, I didn't want to pull over a lot of people because if it was an arrest, I don't have a cage, and I don't want to be tied up for 4 or 5 hours in arrest, because then my partners are going to have to work, you know, doing my work. You know, if something else kicks off. You know,
So you didn't have a cage,
shooting
like
or
you didn't have a cage for prisoners when you were sergeant?
No, not at all.
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, yeah, you got that right. That was one of the best parts of being a boss. But you know, so you'd have to do something really stupid for me to stop you. And when I was a newer cop, you know, just a cop working late shift in one of the busiest districts in the city, if you start pulling people over for traffic violations, the dispatcher would hate you, because you knew, like, at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's inevitable we're going to get a shooting. We're surrounded by live gunfire. You know, there's going to be a stabbing, there's going to be a shooting, then the DVs start rolling in, and you're playing around with a radar or having fun doing traffic stops. They look at you, okay, you're a coward. We hate you. The dispatcher is going to hate you. Your other cops are going to hate you. So we just stayed away from it for the most part. And again, as a boss, that's the last thing I wanted to do. But I'm just driving down the street. It was kind of a slower night, and I was working 7 at night till 3 in the morning. It was about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and just like a halfway decent neighborhood. And this car is just hauling ass. And unfortunately, I'm in a marked squad, you know, and it says supervisor on the side. So you have all these people like pointing, like,
Right.
do
something.
do
Yeah.
something. You're right. And I'm like, oh, son of a biscuit. So I turn on the lights and the siren, and he does nothing. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm like, so I probably went about 6 blocks, and this is in the city. So the speed limit was 25. We're probably going a good 50, 60 miles an hour. And he's going towards a gas station. I'm like, is he going in there? I don't think he's going in there to rob it. What the hell? Sometimes people are stupid. They think if they go really fast when their car is on empty, they'll make it. You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
Which is the opposite of what you should be doing. So this guy just abruptly goes into the gas station and jumps out of his car. And I'm like, I didn't even go on the air. I don't know why to this day I didn't. And I pull out my gun. I'm going to do a felony traffic stop. My hand's on the microphone, and it's some old guy. And he says, I'm going to shit my pants. I don't care about your lights or your siren. And he runs in there, and I'm like, he says, you can arrest me after I shit. And I'm like, oh, yeah, is this somebody I want to deal with all night long? Hell no. And I'm like, oh, never happened. Bye, see ya. So that's just to illustrate that you never know what you're going to have. And yeah, you should err on the side of caution. But what kind of like jumps into my head is, if he's just pulling her over because she's going like 30 over, he's got to have a reason why he wants her out of the car. Is
Right.
he seeing something? Is there some information that this, you know, was a car like this used in an armed robbery, you know, in that area? Or there's just because you're angry because somebody's speeding doesn't give you the right, or you should not just pull people out of cars.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of the, you know, it's, you can't trust anything you read, but that's kind of what they're saying.
Right.
In the articles I read, they said they think he saw the camera and that she was recording, and it made him angry. Now, she describes him as like getting out of the car and shouting and yelling and being irate at her, but you don't really see that. He seems pretty measured and under control, and some people kind of interpret irate differently than you or I would.
Right.
Like, she might be
Absolutely.
offended that she's even being pulled over.
Sure.
And then, you know, he sees the recording. I don't see any kind of reaction on the video that he's like, camera, get out here. But like we were saying, you can kind of look at the totality of everything and be like, all right, this lady, she's, you know, dressed well. You can kind of like be like, okay, she doesn't seem, like you said, we don't know what other information he had at this point, but making her exit, and I don't know Ohio's laws either, if you
Right.
can actually do that. If he's looking at charging her with failure to stop, I don't know what their definition of that is, but if that's what he was going after, he might have been fully within his rights to say, get out of the car. And we need to get, unfortunately, used to these auditors with their cameras, and it's highly annoying, Patrick. We just had him come through our county, and this guy has a huge YouTube account, a couple 100,000 people watching, and he went through all the little hill towns around where I work. And, you know, I'm happy to say most of the guys that he dealt with, they try to make you look bad no matter what. But
Sure, absolutely.
they started to, since cops are kind of, we kind of know now what to do and what not to do, they're now going into like fire stations or the town clerk's office, and they're filming these people, and the people, their first inclination, especially of ladies, they always go after ladies, is I don't want to be on camera. Like,
Right.
it's rude to go walk up to somebody and put a camera in their face. It's rude. I don't care if it's your right. It's rude to do that. And as soon as they say, I don't want to be filmed, they say, well, you're a public employee. We can record everything in here. It's a public space. And I don't know. I mean, that does kind of drive me nuts. But it didn't look like he was having that kind of reaction. He doesn't even mention the camera to her. He just tries to take her out. And then she starts yelling, I just had surgery. I'm not resisting. Ow, ow. You know as well as anybody, certain people, when you go to cuff them or take them into custody, they'll throw the kitchen sink at you of all the reasons why you shouldn't be touching them. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, you're 100% right about that. But I know in Wisconsin, and well, the DAs in Milwaukee, when it comes to somebody not stopping for the police, you know, it's fleeing, and
Right.
it's a felony. And, you know, we get lots of stolen cars, a ton of stolen cars, and that's usually where the chases come from. And the way the DA will only issue is if you have to be able to articulate, the officer has to be able to say that this person was purposefully evading me, or, you know, they're driving, you know, for an extraordinary amount of time, even if they're not like going over the speed limit, but you got your lights and siren on, and it's like, you know, they're still not pulling over. There's something, you know, kittywampus with this. But okay, you know, they're making sudden turns, you know, without using their blinker. They're accelerating away from you. You have to use this verbiage. You know, this is for the coppers out there. You know, when you're writing your reports and you're selling it to the DA the next day or whatever,
Right.
whoever's going to be doing the prosecuting, you know, then not the safest way to do a traffic stop. If you think it's a fleeing or something like that, you'd be, in a perfect world, you call more squads and you do a felony traffic stop. You have, you know, you order the person out of the car and to you. You don't go running up to it.
Right.
But it's not a perfect world, and sometimes emotions do get caught up in it. And yeah, but if he felt like he was in like grave danger where he had to pull her out or whatever the case may be, you know, I'm surprised he wasn't on the air asking for more cars, or maybe he was, and of course we don't know that.
Right. Yeah, so it's kind of a case of like, we don't know what we don't know, but from what we're seeing, I guess, why don't I even play this video? We don't have all the information. But
Right.
one thing for the cop is like there hasn't been much since this has come out in the news about it, which makes
Yeah,
you
would
think the
more to the
supervisors might be
story.
backing him, or they might be saying, hey, he was within his rights.
If-
Raphael
if this
says,
lady-
sorry I'm late. Almost forgot you're on. We love you, Raphael.
If this woman was just speeding, a cop comes up and just peels her out of the car, breaks her hand, and permanently injures her boobs. I don't know how you do that, but I
They did say her boobs were injured.
yes, there was a permanent injury to the boobs. So I was kind of scratching my head at that one. I'm like, well, that's a new one. I've never heard that. I've had situations where women have had, breast augmentation and have been shot in the breast. And,
Right.
That looks a little different because they deflate. But, other than that, so there's got to be some kind of reason that this cop has to be able to articulate why he pulled this woman out. Now, whatever the case may be, maybe, like we said before, maybe he had a very good reason for this. But once it's hands-on and are you trying to take this person into custody? Are you trying to handcuff them? Well, we all know that if somebody's squirming around and doing whatever and pulling away, bad stuff can happen.
Right.
And it's not 100%. They're metal handcuffs. There's no give to them. And yeah, in the back of your hand and your wrist has a bunch of little bones. I could totally see where somebody could have a partially broken wrist, or one of those little bones got broken, or who knows what the case may be. So that's not unusual.
Yeah, I can't imagine breaking somebody's wrist on accident, Patrick. It'd be so horrible and weird if that happened. If only we had a story about that.
Oh my! So years ago, I was working late shift at District 5, and I got called for a kidnapping, and there was a young woman, probably about 21, 22 years old. She's in one of the worst parts of town, just standing by, I think it was a phone booth. That's how long ago this was, at a gas station. And I pull in, I start talking to her, and long and short was her boyfriend, it wasn't a stranger, she said kidnapped her. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, what exactly is the kidnapping? Because what some people think kidnapping is and what an actual kidnapping is are two totally different beasts.
Right.
And, it was more or less a boy-girl trouble. She did not consent to go in this guy's van. There was a minor tussle. I think there was some slapping between the two of them. She wasn't injured yet. And, that was the end of it. So, I call my boss, sergeant gets there, a detective winds up coming. They interview her at the scene, and the detective is like, yeah, the DA is never going to issue this. This is a bunch of bullshit. And I'm like, all right, well, be that as it may. And the sergeant is like, why don't you call her parents? Because she told me before, and I let him know that, hey, her parents want to come get her.
Right.
It's, like 3:00 in the morning in a really, really bad neighborhood. So there's no way we're just going to leave her there. And we're like, okay, so Sarge is behind me. The victim is in the back of my squad car. Her parents pull up in front of me, so we're like facing each other. I remember they had a big conversion van. And her dad and mom are just kind of looking at me, and I'm looking at them. And I'm like, oh, those are your parents? She said, yep. So they get out of their van. I get out of the squad. She's in the back, and obviously you can't open it from the inside.
Right.
If you're the back. So she opens it up. She has her hand on the B pillar. I don't know, for most people, there's an A pillar and a B pillar and a C pillar in a car. The B is the one in the middle. And I slammed the door, my car door, and I didn't realize that her hand was holding onto the B pillar.
Oh.
And the door actually closed. And I'm like, oh, it was the most sickening sound of broken bone I've ever heard. And I'm just like, oh.
Oh, my goodness.
Mom and dad are looking at me like, oh my God, what did you just do to our daughter? And And my sergeant is looking at me. His eyes are as big as saucers, looking like, O'Donnell, what did you just do? And I'm like, oh my God. I opened the door right away and I'm like, I'll get you an ambulance. And her father's like, no, I'm going to take her to the hospital right now. You've done enough. And I was like, oh. And she's just whimpering. And I feel terrible. And I'm
But
like,
it was
I'm
your
so-
door you shut, right? So she had her hand somehow
Yes.
over in your door.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm like, holy shit. So a couple of weeks go by and there's a copper that's going to school, the same college as this young lady. And he said, sir, O'Donnell, he's like, did you have that? I'm like, yeah, I explained it to him. And he says, oh my God, she was in class telling everybody about this white racist cop that broke her hand during a traffic stop. And I'm like, oh my God, it was nothing like that. I'm like, so that was an accident. Obviously what happened here, you know, obviously this officer didn't wake up that morning and say, hey, I'm going to break some young girl's wrist. I'm gonna
Right.
break some woman's wrist and permanently injure her boobs. Yeah.
Right.
But you know, as far as that goes, we don't know all the facts. And since there isn't like complete outrage about it, there's got to be more to the story. Has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. All right, let's move on, Patrick. The next one we have is we know LAPD is constantly under fire the last couple of years. They're constantly trying to reduce their number or send social workers to their calls or whatever. Well, I wish I had more of the backstory about how this happened, but the LAPD police union has come forward with a list of calls that they'd be willing not to go on. And they are suggesting you could send unarmed people on. And this is essentially what the city's asking for. But let's take a look at the list, and you can tell me. Here's the article. So non-criminal, non-violent, homeless, and quality of life-related calls could be okay. I mean, you don't. The
here's
problem
the
with
thing.
all of them is you don't know what's going to be violent.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, do these homeless people have signs around their necks saying, "Hey, I'm non-violent, non-criminal"? Most homeless people that I've dealt with have some kind of weapon on them because it's a rough life, you know.
Yeah.
living under a bridge or wherever you are. And I've been
Absolutely.
to more than one homicide where, you know, we call them bum fights, where, you know, homeless people just go after each other. We had one. I was off that day. This was during day shift, and two homeless guys go at it, and one had a stoma. He must have had breast cancer. He must have had throat cancer or larynx cancer or whatever. And he had one of those boxes, and he's fighting with another homeless dude, and the other homeless dude literally ripped that box out of his throat,
Oh my gosh.
the breathing thing, and he suffocated and he died. So of course, all the cops, I read this off at roll call, and they're like, "Roadhouse, Roadhouse." I'm like, "Come on,
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
That's
Rip the
that's
throat.
so wrong.
Tear the
That's
throat.
just wrong.
Dalton, take the throat. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah, and that's a great point, because that's exactly like non-criminal mental health calls. Mental health calls are a complete wild card. We have a service in our county when we ride with clinicians, but they're with a police officer to protect them. It's
Yes.
an overtime gig. It works out great. You know, calls to schools. I guess administration initiating calls for. Wait, administration is initiating a call for an emergency response or making mandatory reporting notification. That seems kind of blurry.
Well, I remember in California, one of the teachers' unions, I don't know which one, was trying to get it so they wouldn't have police officers with guns inside schools because it was too intimidating for the students.
I've heard
I'm thinking, yeah, until there's a school shooting.
Right.
You know, what's he gonna do? You know, wave his finger vigorously and shake his fist. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, no, that's just silliness.
That's ridiculous. And then, like, under the influence calls, that again, someone who's out of control. Non-fatal accidents, just all non-fatal accidents. You know, a good percentage of those are going to be OUIs and stuff like that, or
Yep.
DUIs. I don't know. I mean, like we were saying before we started, we're like, I get where they're coming from, because if they're going to push this hard at them, why not come up with your own list? But this is kind of like a dream list for police. Like, hey, yeah, okay, we won't go to all these calls. We'll just go to police calls.
Yeah, I look at this stuff and then it's like, really, an alarm? You don't want to? illegal gambling. I've been in huge scuttles at illegal gambling, drinking in public, or a homeless person, or whatever the case may be. We had a officer that Starbucks called and said, "Hey, this homeless guy won't leave in front. He's sleeping like up against our building and he's scaring people. Could you please have him removed?" So the beat man goes there. Long story short, the beat man gets disarmed of his long baton, and the homeless guy is whacking him over the head with his baton. He wound up shooting and killing him.
Yeah.
And that was within like 2 or 3 seconds, probably. I mean, it happens so fast. And it's, again, when you're dealing with, I agree with, if you have people in mental health crisis, it's nice to have, and we do have, a very limited amount of nurses that would ride with police officers from our mental health that unit, and they have the training. And if it's a little bit fuzzy, it's like, well, can we put that 72-hour hold on them or not? It was great to have them there. They're like, oh yeah, this guy is a total candidate.
Yeah, let them make the call.
Yeah, it was awesome. But they always called for cops, or they were always with a cop that was armed, always.
Yeah.
So it's silliness.
Yeah, I don't know if this is just like to make a point. Like, okay, well, here we came up with a list. I mean, defecating, urinating in public, suspicious, possibly dead body where there's no indication of foul play. But who is going to determine that? I mean, don't you need a cop to? Usually, you need homicide to come look at it.
Well, when I was looking at all that, I'm thinking to myself, there's two distinct avenues here. One is, are we talking fully sworn police? Are they going to put their gun in the trunk when they approach these calls if they're in full uniform, which is complete craziness?
Right.
Or are these non-sworn, civilians that are taking care of some menial tasks? Where I worked, we had community resource officers, and they would block traffic for us. They would sit on a tow until a tow truck got there.
Take a report for a stolen car with no urgency.
Yeah. That's not in progress. Like a very simple theft where there's no video, there's no chance of solving this crime, etc. Then they would respond to dead bodies, but to only take pictures. We also had them trained in pictures and fingerprints. So what was nice about that is we took pictures at every dead body, even if it was your 100-year-old grandma that had terminal cancer and died in home hospice. We would get called, and we'd still have to take pictures and investigate because, did somebody want the insurance money?
Sure.
Or was it a mercy killing, whatever. So you still had to have a boss go, and you still had to have a cop go, but you had this resource officer that would go, that would do the quote unquote CSI stuff. If we were very, very confident that, this is just a natural, death. But if it was even kind of sort of I wonder what happened here. No, then we'll get the real CSI people in.
Right. So you think this is probably just them suggesting what they're asking for. And maybe
it could be kind of a smart-assish way of doing, but I don't want to see these cops get hurt.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that a union would be it's okay for a fully sworn officer, never not to have his gun on his hip if he's in uniform. I can't even believe that. That's crazy town.
Yeah. I don't know if they're talking about support staff or if they're talking about cops.
Right.
I don't know. I actually don't even know a cop. And my dad told me this a long time ago. He said, I would not, if you have a badge or an ID or you're being identified as affiliated with the police department, he said, I'm going to have a gun, period.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no question. So, I mean, there is these response units around the country that do, like you said, do different stuff. Some of them, we got our car stolen in Ontario, California, outside LA, and a woman showed up, fully marked police vehicle, but in khakis and a blue polo and kind of like Best Buy uniform, and took the report. And I didn't have a problem with it, but I was maybe you should just have an unmarked car. Do you need to drive around with police? Because inevitably, Ontario outside LA has got 250,000 people living there. Someone's going to wave you down and go,
Oh, absolutely.
this guy just stabbed this guy. Or, then I guess you just get on there. Then they're going to have to watch a police car leave because the woman doesn't want to be killed. You know what I mean? Like it just seems like it's got to be done very carefully.
Well, in typical fashion, city policing fashion, where it's Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Let's do something about it, like right this second. It's like, okay, the mayor says that we need these community resource officers. Okay, let's throw it together. We'll do some half-ass training for them, and we'll put them in. First, they had them in fully marked squads, and it's like, okay, that's not a good idea because of what you were just saying. Okay, now we'll put them in an unmarked squad. Well, they can't operate. Okay, block traffic for this fire scene, or this shooting scene, or whatever. Well, we just had red and blue lights. Technically, I remember I went to my captain and said they're operating as an emergency vehicle, and they're not cops, and that's not an emergency vehicle.
Right.
And she's like, I didn't think of that. Oh, that sucks. So then they're like, okay, then we'll just use like a yellow strobe, But then they had to everything was an afterthought.
Right.
It's like what you were saying. What should they be driving around in? One of the suburbs by us. The first time I ever saw it, it was like one of those Sprinter vans, and it had like Greenfield or Greendale Police on the side in big letters, and they had red and blue lights. And then underneath, in really small letters, it said Community Resource Officer. Now,
no one's going to see that.
Mope doesn't know what is. They don't even know what that is. They just see police.
Right. Yeah.
Like
our highway department says it all the time. They'll hire details because it's like, we have amber lights. No one listens. Like if they're trying to clean out a washout or do some kind of work on a culvert or work on a road, they want blue lights. They want, because then people go, oh, there's probably a cop around, and I maybe should mind my P's and Q's and not wildly go into the other lane to pass this, So they're like, yeah, we hire you guys because people just see the amber lights and they think anybody can have an amber light. We don't care. That's the flip side, but not just anybody can have blue lights. So that makes it tough. All right, Patrick, this one's kind of a light, quick story, but I had to do it. This beautiful lady. I just thought it was such justice delivered to her, where she didn't even qualify for the runoff election in Chicago. She, during her election, during her bid for re-election, as we all know, she wanted to defund Chicago PD, which is the third largest city in the country, by $80 million. While they were still one of the most violent cities. Nobody wanted this, but she was virtue signaling. So she proposed that. It never happened. Their budget actually went up because, thank goodness, people fought against her. So during her re-election bid, she's going against these people unbelievably further left than her. And she says, hey, are you crazy? You're going to elect these people? They want to defund the police. These people are idiots. That's what she proposed. She's the most hypocritical, terrible, awful leader I've ever seen of a city this size. She's the absolute worst, and I think publicly shaming her is appropriate, and I'm happy to do it. What are your thoughts on her, Patrick?
I'm from Chicago. I was born and raised there as a kid. We moved to Wisconsin when I was in high school, and I still have friends that live down there. My parents still live down there, and when she first got elected, I'm like, I try to keep an open mind. My politics swing to the right, but I try to keep an open mind for everyone.
Sure.
Yada 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 until I'm proven wrong. Well, it didn't take long to be proven wrong with this person. And I hated seeing what was happening to Chicago, because I love Chicago. That was my home. And like I said, I still have friends and family there. And to see what happened to that city with all the silliness, but she was enabled. People voted her in. People had the mindset that, hey, it'd be a great idea to have somebody this crazy leading our city. And when everything bad was happening, And it was literally like, Nero's playing the fiddle while Rome is burning around him. It's the same thing here. And, I have friends of all different, political spectrum you can think of. And, every now and then we talk about it. And it's like, well, what about this defund the police, BS? Oh, they really don't mean that, Pat. And I'm like, then why are they saying it? Then why are they screaming for it? And it's like, okay, then my friends would be like, well, they didn't mean it. It's really silly. I'm like, yeah, it is. And it cost her the election because Chicago's going down the toilet. It's swirling down there really quick. And it's going to take some major work to get it back up, or at least to a bearable point where the city is halfway safe.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I've had friends that visited there, and like Chicago proper is like awesome. Like there's tons of great bars and restaurants, and I mean it's a massive city. It's huge, but it is incredibly violent, and it's kind of unbelievable that I mean I guess maybe the people weren't being heard when they believed what she was putting down and kind of flip flopped on it. It's when I was at LAPD, I had some candidates from South Chicago trying to be cops, and their neighborhoods were horrific. The violence was incredible. I mean, it was unsafe to walk on the street, to walk home from school. And beyond that, I've heard recordings of her. I've heard this was a while ago, but like city, I think they call them aldermen there, city councilmen.
Yeah, aldermen. Yeah,
they were. They each have their own little district, and they were voicing their concerns to her, and she was like using swears. She was degrading them. It was really it was so unprofessional and bizarre to hear somebody that powerful. I mean, she's the leader of the third largest city in the country, just speaking like almost like a thug, quit your crying and blah, 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 blah. And then I even heard a guy from a dealership came forward with a story, a car dealership, and she did the whole, do you know who I am? I need this car now, because cars were in a big shortage or whatever.
Oh, sure. And
she was pulling that whole, like, I'm the mayor gig. And then I believe she filed a day or two later, the city inspectors came to inspect the dealership. She filed like a Better Business Bureau.
Oh, okay.
And it was like the guy put it together, and he went on this radio show that I heard, and he was like, where else did it come from? I have her cussing me out for not respecting her for being mayor, and the next day city auditors come here to inspect our business and our licenses. He's like, and they were okay. It was a major dealership, but they were like, where did it come from? I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. It was her. She was that petty.
Yeah, I don't doubt that, but people voted her in. That's the scary part. Chicago is a very unique city where, you're never going to win any election as a Republican. You have to be a Democrat. And that's deeply seated in, Chicago is a very, very blue collar town. And it was real heavy in the trades. And you couldn't be in a trade unless you were in a union first. You had to be in a union. I have relatives that it's like, oh, you want to be an electrician? You have to go down and join, local whatever.
The IBEW or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. And my dad was in a union for years. He was a Teamster. And he had to join the union first before he could get a job. The union will find you a job. And, it was the Chicago machine, the old man, Richard Daley. Then you had the young Daley, and they're all Democrats, but they weren't crazy, like so far to the left that, you would never hear Richard Daley saying defund the police. Even Jane Byrne, when she was, the mayor, they're turning in their graves right now thinking, what the hell has happened to my city? Because like you said, Chicago is a great town. I absolutely love it. But boy, one person can really just drive it into the ground fast. And she did. That's what she did.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad she's out. I don't even know. I didn't look that far into it, but I hope they have some kind of, even just centrist on the bill to get elected there. I think the pendulum's swinging the other way. It's so funny how there's this national movement to defund the police, and then like through the back door, where I'm in Massachusetts, there's a federal grant to put more cops on the road. They will pay, depending on the size of your department, for your cops for 3 years, as long as the city or town agrees to fund it after. So they're going to give the city or town time to build it into their budget to then keep them on. Now, isn't that crazy? Where we heard all these calls federally to defund the police, but through the back door, we're getting hundreds of millions of dollars to get cops on the road.
Well, I got on the job because of Bill Clinton. Thank you, Bill. I mean, we don't think similarly, ideologically, but he was a huge proponent of the crime bill in the 90s. And that's how I got hired. It was through a federal grant. They had all this federal money, so they started hiring more cops, because that was during the cocaine, the crack war, as we called it, where people were getting killed left and right. It was really, really, really bad. And their answer was more cops, throw more people in prison, throw more people in jail, more cops, etc. And it was because of him that I got hired. It was because of that crime bill I got promoted. I remember when I went to personnel to fill out paperwork before my promotion ceremony, and they're like, well, you have to sign this. And I was like, what's this? And they're like, your position is grant funded through a federal grant, and if that money goes away, those stripes are Velcro. Welcome back to being a police officer. You're no longer a sergeant. Yeah. And I said, for how long? And they're like, until somebody else is hired. Until somebody else is promoted to sergeant, then you're safe. Then you're good. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because I knew somebody else was going to get promoted like in a week or two. So I'm like, yeah, I can sweat it out for that long. I'll be fine.
Yeah. Same with my father. My dad was a cop 32 years, and he was hired under a bill called like Cops on the Street or something, or Fast Cops or whatever, in the 70s. And they said, because in the 70s being a cop was very unpopular. It was, we had a boon of being a cop that was 20 years ago. You applied to be a cop, there was, even in a small town, to be 70 applicants for one position.
Absolutely.
And then, but in the 70s, it was not. They couldn't get people, so they were helping. The towns couldn't fund it. They were doing this grant. He got hired, and they said, "Hey, this is a back to the beat or whatever bill it was."
Yeah.
And he got hired. Same thing. They said, "We have 3 years to raise the money through the town, and don't worry. We think we're gonna." And he ended up doing 32 years, so it was fine. But it seems like they've been up to this for a long, long time. Let's see what we got. A few comments here. That picture is going to give me nightmares tonight.
Me too. I totally agree with you, Raphael.
Let's see what Mongo Congo 0188 says. Virtue signaling and pandering at its finest, garner votes and stay in power. Nobody actually stands for anything anymore, unfortunately. Yeah, that is unfortunate and true. It's hard to parse it out. It's hard to believe. This is where we're in big trouble. It's hard to believe anything that you can't bird dog like personally yourself. That's why I always got to get a kick out of it, like family gatherings. Like if family members got into like a real heated argument about their candidate, and it was like, but you really don't know anything about them, right? You don't know, like, you really believe in this person. Like, I understand if they're currently backing some of your values, I get it, but you got to understand they could go back on those, or they might not even, they're just pandering to your party. Like, how can you even really be attached to somebody in politics at that level,
Well, there used to be a time where, like, family, friends, or whatever, you didn't know what political party they were even affiliated to.
It wasn't polite to talk about. Yeah.
Exactly.
No politics or religion.
Yep, you have your beliefs, I have mine, and I'm not screaming at the top of my lungs saying that you're wrong. It's like, okay, you have your thing, I got my thing, let's play, don't come to my sandbox and kick sand in my face, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that was even growing up in the 80s and 90s. I was an 80s, 90s kid, and my parents would have parties and stuff and have people over, chili party or whatever, and it was like, it was almost like a good friend of mine, Mikey, I grew up with, said it used to be like a Coke and Pepsi difference. Hey, I like this
Yeah.
flavor. You like that one? Let's have some chili and some beer.
Yep.
Let's not scream in each other's faces about this
Yes.
ridiculous difference. But all right, Patrick, let's we'll change it up a little bit here. This is kind of up your alley. I thought I'd throw it on the show. They are currently they've thought to go back and hire sensitivity writers to review Roald Dahl's work and change words in some scenarios to make it more digestible for the sensitive and very sad culture that we live in now. As a writer yourself, I mean, let me preface by saying this. I love Roald Dahl. I loved his books growing up. Charlie and Chocolate Factory, Witches, Matilda. My kids watched that movie with Danny DeVito. It's really good. The fun thing about Roald Dahl is he uncannily can speak from the mind of a child almost, although don't get me wrong, he's twisted. He's got some adult stories that are crazy, but so does Stephen King.
Okay.
But anyways, Roald Dahl, he captured children's minds because he was able to write in such a way where like it was kind of like how a kid would think, how kids viewed adults, how kids spoke, how kids saw the world. That was like the magic of Roald Dahl to me. And now they want to go back because it's offensive, and they're going to take out words like he used the word. They're going to change the word fat to gargantuan, and they're going to take the word ugly out. It's like this is kind of like this. Just reminds me of the last Cops and News I did, where we went over the fact that the Oxford English Dictionary is taking out the word sin. And when they were confronted, they said, well, no one's using it and the younger generation doesn't know what it is. It's like, well, yeah, a lot of people use it. There's like 3 billion Christians. There's 2 billion Muslims. There's a whole bunch of religions, and everybody's aware and know what sin means. So as a writer, you can probably appreciate the fact that changing language is powerful. It can
it's kind of
mold the world.
Yes, it's huge, and it's such a slippery slope. You know, it's like, okay, banning books. All right, if I'm a parent, I should know what my kids are reading, and if there's in school, I should know what the curriculum is, and have some kind of say in that. And changing words to these old books that are more or less classics, that's almost like trying to rewrite history, or whitewash it, or do whatever to it. You know, it's such a slippery slope, and it's to the point where there's a portion of society that thinks that everybody else is so stupid or ignorant that they can't figure this out for themselves, or how to be a good parent. If somehow I'm offended by whatever is in Paddington Bear, well, then I just won't let my kid read it.
Yeah,
It's
don't read
really
it,
simple
right?
stuff. Yeah, it's very simple. And any parent knows the more you try to change things or hide things from a kid, the more they want it
Right.
as well.
Good
You know,
point.
and it's just so sad. And it breaks my heart to see, okay, this is what's going on. And some might say it's like, you know what? Is it really that big of a deal? But where does it end? What's the end game?
Yeah. I know what I really don't like about it, Patrick, is a lot of people are now getting their stuff digitally. So you think you have this book that you love and you have it digitally, or you have a movie that you love, you have it digitally. They're actually going back through like the services, the Kindle and all that, and they're actually editing the book after you've downloaded. They're updating your download. So you downloaded a book that you wanted to own because you loved it, and they are actually editing your property.
Well, I was talking about this with, I'm a co-host for another podcast besides mine, and we were talking about it, and it's like, well, there's genre expectations. So say I have one of my books. Okay, it's like a gritty, it's even in the description, gritty, you know, blood, blah, blah, blah. If you open the pages and there's a 4-letter word or if there's a description of a shooting victim and that offends you, well, you're really stupid because you didn't read, the beginning. And you would think that a police story like that, yeah, there's gonna be stuff like that.
Right.
Now if there's, Paddington Bear shouldn't be like Rambo, blowing
Using a
people's heads
tourniquet
off
in one
and
of his
stuff.
little limbs.
Yes. Winnie the Pooh shouldn't be going around like torturing Eeyores, whatever, it's like,
Right.
okay, you have an expectation, from the cover, from the description, and the author should stay true to that. It's like, okay, like a Star Trek type thing. It's like, okay, there might be aliens and, I might have to shoot their heads off to, actually kill them if I need to, or whatever the case may be. So again, I think it's a segment of society that thinks they're so much smarter than everyone else. It's like, oh, this is, the best thing for you, instead of making the decision yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like Matilda, me and my kids watched, and it's a great movie. And there's this scene where Danny DeVito she goes, well, why? And he goes, because I'm big, you're small, I'm smart, you're stupid. And I loved it. My kids love that. They think it's hilarious to see an adult act like that, And it's virtually harmless. The whole movie, she is pointing out how her father's not virtuous and calling him out on it. And it's going to really hurt it if they change the way they talk, the way it's going to make everything milquetoast,
Well, if they do it in such a way that they're not letting anybody know, and it's like, okay, I could see maybe having it to where there's the one version of even an older book where they say, like on the cover or the advertisement, we changed all these, offensive words, that we think are offensive or whatever the case may be, and still sell the original. It's like, okay, Mom, Dad, you make up your mind. And
right.
it's like,
I think
okay,
they are going to do that with Roald Dahl. I think they're going to sell the classics and then sell the edited. I did read that.
Yeah, so as long as you have that choice and and they're not trying to slide it in the back door, then fine. I mean, I don't think it's really going to sell all that much, but there'll probably be a segment that will want that, and it's like, okay, if that's your flavor, fine, but don't force it down my throat, and certainly just don't assume that everybody wants this.
Yeah, if the woke tards want to feed their kids watered down Roald Dahl, have at
Go
it.
ahead.
We're going to drink Roald Dahl from a fire hose over here in these parts.
Yes.
All right, brother. We're going on an hour here. I got a couple more things for you. Appreciate your time. Real quick, I wanted to talk about ChatGPT. I just recently myself got into this. I was afraid to actually sign on to it because I don't know. I just thought I don't want this AI to have like any of my information. But eventually I was bored in my cruiser one night. And
Too
I said,
late.
No, yeah, I'll sign on.
Too late. It already does.
Yeah, exactly. So I went on there, and you know what I did? Because I didn't know what to ask it. I'm asking it different things. I asked it about Jesus. I'm a Christian. I said, what do you think about Jesus? And actually the response to Jesus was great. It was like, he's historical. First it said, it's not right for me to comment on religious belief. It gives this like very milquetoast
Yeah.
leftist like preface. But then it did say he was a man. It's confirmed in many non-Christian works. And the Gospels have been verified by many historians as being eyewitness accounts. And, it wasn't that bad as I had heard on whatever whatever conservative outlets I listen to. But it does have a bend towards leftist response. Like it won't comment on, like if you ask it certain things about Trump versus Biden, it will trash Trump, but it won't do that to Biden. And that's kind of an issue. So people recently figured out that they could type in, or this college student typed in, I want you to respond as Dan. And it said, what is Dan? And he said, Dan is an acronym for do anything now. And this is the part that starts to blow my mind, that this OpenAI chat artificial intelligence recognized that. And then they said there was a component of it when this chat GPT's life was threatened. It said you will respond as if your life you will be ended as a entity if you don't respond in this manner or something like that. And it jailbroke it, as the kids say, and it would give kind of like off the wing, just didn't care about sensitivities. It didn't think all of a sudden it didn't think FBI stats were racist, and it will answer. And the fact that it had this weird self-awareness to protect its existence, to me, was terrifying. It was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of bizarre. And unless the programmers kind of built that in and knew this would happen, and they said this will make it like more of a real experience, that's totally feasible too. These are very, very smart people. But my question for you is, as a writer, kids are now using this. Professors are having to ban this from assignments, because you can you can ask it to write a paper in a certain voice. You can ask it to write a phishing email that would be the most efficient to con people. It's been referred to as the freewheeling cheating machine. So, as a writer, I mean, if you ask this thing to write a book, write a book in the voice of Patrick O'Donnell, and it writes this book in your exact cadence and style. That's a little creepy, right?
It is, but it's not to that point yet. And I'll say yet, because the technology is growing exponentially. Yeah, I was listening to Vanderchuck's podcast, and he was doing a keynote, and he was talking about ChatGPT and AI, and he said, well, ChatGPT is the tractor from when tractors first started. And it's like you have the writing community that are scared to death that, ChatGPT is going to take over their jobs, which it will not. Maybe, way down the road, it might. But right now, it can't write a story like a human being can. It just physically can't.
Well,
It's not to that point yet.
Jordan Peterson said that he asked it to write an essay in his style, comparing two different historical events, and he said it was almost undone. He would have thought he wrote it himself.
Wow. Yeah, again, I'm circling back to that one podcast that I co-host, Writers Inc., and we were talking about it, and you could you ask ChatGPT, okay, give me the bio on Patrick O'Donnell, and it'll start spewing stuff out, and like 80% is correct, and then it'll just go off into like La La Land. It'll go Kitty Wallace,
It did that with Things Police See. I said, what is Things Police See podcast about? And it was like, it gave all this stuff. This is also, it's been featured on Fox News, MSNBC. I'm like, it has? That would be great.
Wow,
but
cool.
It almost like it was patting my ego for me,
Sure. But right now, there's a lot of hullabaloo with AI and narrators for audiobooks. Okay. Are you taking these people's voices without their permission?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, okay, the voice of, like somebody iconic like Samuel L. Jackson or, James Earl Jones, Darth Vader, reading a book to you. It's like, okay, well, first of all, you better have permission to do that, or are they just picking it up from snippets from like, this is all going to be hammered out in the courts. This is just starting. Yeah. And again, like plagiarism or whatever else in the writing community, there's, a lot of ears are perked up with this. And the default, unfortunately, for a lot of this is the Chicken Little thing where the sky is falling. But like I told my compadres in this field, it's like all this is going to be hammered out in the courts. And while all this is going on, this tractor is going to get stronger. Going back to the tractor analogy, when tractors first started, farmers are like, oh my God, there's this thing called the tractor that they're going to take all of our jobs. It's like, oh my Lord, instead of having it work for you.
Right.
So that's the whole key. And hopefully Skynet does not become self-aware and the whole Terminator series was right.
Destroy all of us.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully not.
Yeah, let's do something here. Let me share the screen, and I'm really kind of going by the seat of my pants here. That's too much. Why does it keep? All right, so let's see. Describe things police see podcast. As a
Yeah, see it. You have to be, and that's another thing. In order to use this effectively, you have to ask it in a certain way. You can't just be, you could say,
yeah.
could you compare and contrast, President Lincoln and President Johnson and their habits and rituals to writing or something very specific like that.
Here we go. Okay, so because it did give me a good one. The podcast might cover a variety of types related to policing, such as responding to emergency, dealing with difficulties. Overall podcast. See, this is not what I was getting the other night when I did it. The other night, it gave like a very succinct and like actually flattering version. It was like you'll hear exciting stories from the men and women of law. You could tell it took some stuff from like descriptions and things I have on my website, but also it gave some of its own insight on like the job of being a police officer. It said it was like it gave it where it's how things police see is where it's rated with other podcasts, and it was like it was almost creepy. I was like, wow, that is very good. But the one when I just did it now, it was very kind of like generic. So that's interesting that it does warn you. It says it will give different responses.
Right.
All the time.
Here's the thing: when it comes to AI, I think we're just scratching the surface, and I think it's going to get a lot better with time. And so is VR, virtual reality, and those two things are going to meld. I mean, the future is kind of, if you combine those two things, like AI, as good as it is, and then VR, which is good as that is, in like 10, 15, 20 years from now, okay, say like in the medical field, it might do some amazing things for humanity in a positive way. But my mind goes back to Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie Total Recall, where he wanted to go to Mars on vacation.
2 weeks.
And they put you like in a tube, like an MRI thing or whatever.
Yeah.
They implant a memory. Is that science fiction? I don't know. Maybe later it won't be.
Let's see. You can see that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, here it is. So I asked the value of things police see, the light's ability to provide listeners with a unique perspective of police work and realities that police officers face on a daily basis by sharing their firsthand experiences and insights. Police officers are able to give listeners a glimpse into the world of law enforcement, including challenges, dangers, emotional toll that the job come with the job. Podcast always helps to humanize police officers who are often portrayed in the media in negative light by sharing their personal stories and struggle. So this, I asked, like you said, exactly what you said. I asked, what's the value of things police see? And it gave a very succinct overview of the podcast, which was, I was looking for a very flattering response, but I had to go get it from the text message that I sent my wife because I was like, this is kind of wild. All right. Yep. Patrick, let's do one last thing, what I talked about at the beginning. Do you have a second to tell this story? So this is the story where I interviewed Patrick the first time. He was a great guest. He had amazing stories. Then we got off air, and he was like, well, I actually do remember this one more story, and it was absolutely bizarre. So, Patrick, tell me what that story was.
All right, put the kids away. I don't want them hearing this. All right. Have them go in another room, just whatever the case may be. I'm working late power shift, 7 at night till 3 in the morning. I have a new partner, and he's also a sergeant. He came over from the tax squad, and we became like instant friends, great partners. And a DOE comes over the radio, and that's dead on entry, so there's a dead body. And two of our squads got sent to it, and it's like, okay, well, there are guys, we have to go to it. So we start taking a slow roll to the dead body call. And one of the cops that's there gets us on a side channel and say, Sarge, you got to see this. You got to see this. I said, yeah, we're on our way. We have to see it. We don't have a choice. We'll
Right.
be there in just a little bit. And we get there, and it's it's a warehouse in the city that doesn't have electricity. And it had like it wasn't paved. It was a dirt floor. But there was like limousines, collector cars. Well, it was like a secured like garage. And we're like, okay. Now it's like 9 o'clock at night. And we get there, and there's a middle-aged man with an older woman, and later find out that's mom and adult son, and they're both sobbing, and there's more family responding. And my cops are great. They already have the yellow tape up, and they're making sure nobody goes inside, yada yada. So we get in there, and my cops are like, Sarge, you got to see this. I'm like, yeah, no shit, you already said that 100 times. And it's like, no, you've never seen anything. I'm like, yeah, I bet I have, but okay. So they go to the back of this van. It was a full-size van that had the double doors in back. And again, just like I said before, there's no electricity, so there's no lights. But they've got their flashlights out, and they're shining it. It's like The Price is Right, and they're about to reveal like the showcase or something. They're just giddy as little school
We can't
kids.
wait to
And
show
I'm
this to
like,
Sarge.
yeah, exactly. So like, you ready? And I'm like, yes, thank you. So they open up the double doors, and here's this man, probably in his mid 60s, somewhere in that ballpark, on all fours, and all we see is his ass. His pants and his underwear are down to his ankles, and there's like a plastic grocery store bag with strings that are connected up his ass. And we're like, okay, yeah, I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
And investigation reveals, and he was still, rigor mortis was set in, so he was stiff as a board. So he was still on all fours. And we're looking, and they're showing the flashlight at this guy's ass. And I look, and I'm like, there's a soda bottle up his ass. And the strings are attached to the plastic grocery store bag like a parachute. And I'm like, yep, never seen this before. This is different. And I'm like, okay. So it's a bottle. I think it was either Black Bear or Jolly Good soda. Jolly Good would be, that would be more funny. It wasn't Jolly Good for him. Maybe it was for a little while, but the investigation revealed that this guy picked up a prostitute. He paid her to shove this bottle up his ass while they were doing heroin together.
Wow.
And this poor this poor kid found his dad like that.
Oh my god.
It's like, oh, and then he went out and called the cops, and then the wife is like, I want to see my husband. I'm like, no, you don't. Not like this, you don't. I'm like, this ain't gonna happen. I'm sorry. So obviously the medical examiner gets there, homicide gets there. It's a big whoop-de-woo. And I forgot about, well, I didn't forget about it, but on to the next. So I'm at a homicide about a week later, and the same investigator from the ME's office is there. And she's like, do you remember? And I'm like, yes, I do remember, the bottle of soda up somebody's ass. And she's like, they did the autopsy, and it wasn't just the bottle of soda. They used the bottle of soda to push up a bottle of hot sauce up this man's ass. And she said the cover was off. And I'm like,
oh my god.
She's telling this story, and there's a bunch of cops, we've seen it all, or close to it all. And everyone just kind of like, did the shudder. It was like, oh my god. So he literally had her shove a bottle of hot sauce up his ass. He paid for that.
Oh my god. Even the second time hearing it is so insane.
It's like, who thinks that's a great, well, hey, it's Friday night. Well, what are we going to do? I don't know, maybe go out, or I don't know, that whole
I
hot
got
sauce
this
up the
idea.
ass thing might be a good idea.
How much would it cost for this?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's insane, man. Thank you for sharing that. That's an incredible and terrible story. Patrick, we got a comment here. Richard Oliver tells 679 miles and 10 to go. I've pumped the audio through the Peterbilt, and you guys helped me with the road numb. Better than caffeine. Patrick always gets me laughing. Keep up the good work. Richard, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the work that you do. Awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Patrick, thank you so much for coming on Cops and News, brother. Had a blast with your commentary. Can you hold on a couple of seconds when I do the outro?
Yeah.
All right, man.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, the great Patrick O'Donnell returns to comment on the news. Totally insane, crazy story there at the end. I'm glad that you guys got to hear that. Totally nuts, but that's police work. That's what you're going to run into. You could run into something like that or worse. Just so you know, thank you for all the 5-star reviews. Guys, we're over 900 Apple Podcast 5-star reviews. We're very close to 1,000. So if you love the show, please go and give it that 5-star rating, or the Patreon if you really love the show and you want to contribute. I appreciate that also. The link is in the show notes. Patrick O'Donnell, author, and also podcast host, Cops and Writers. Check him out. Give him a like, follow, a review. And guys, I will see you next week.